session. Okay, it's Tuesday, July the 11th, 2023 at 6 p.m. and we are opening this session of the Carlton City Council work session. Could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mayor Linda Watkins,
Here.
Council President Shirley Ward Mullen. Here. Councilor Skipper.
Here.
Councilor Randall.
Here.
Councilor Erickson. Councilor Thompson Riser.
Here.
Councilor David Hill.
Here.
For absent.
Thank you. All right, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, so starting work session with item A, vacation rental details and discussion. Mayor, City Manager.
Mayor and Council, this is a follow-up from the work session that we had in March of 2023 regarding vacation rentals. At that point in time, the City Council had asked for additional information, including a comparison of license fees in other cities, parking rules from other cities, comparison of the process in other cities, and a summary of McMinnville's short-term rental changes. We have compiled that information for you. You have a sheet that summarizes the first three that I listed: the fees, the parking rules of several towns, and the notification processes. In addition, we have taken a modification of chapter 17.125 and redlined, and that red line is in front of you. I realized in your packet it was all black, and it's very difficult to figure out what changed. So I apologize for that, but that red line is in front of you for discussion only, just as we move through this. There's a summary of McMinnville requirements that the city attorney can go over. There's also was included in your work packet, the March 14th work session information, just a reminder of what we've gone over. And the city attorney has also included some general parking statistics for Salem, McMinnville, City, and Amity to go over various parking rules for vacation rentals, but also the city council has asked for a review of our own parking ordinance to light parking at the various topics. Tyler, do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Was contentious with the McMinnville City Council relating to their short-term rentals. But there was a distance between rentals.
Can you give us a page number?
I actually didn't find the page, Mayor. I was just looking while I was talking.
Sorry, that's okay.
Summary of McMinnville starts on page 23.
Okay.
So one of the big contention points that the councilors had difficulty coming to agreement on was how far apart they wanted short-term rentals to be. And that's of course a minimum distance, not, it can be as far apart as city boundaries allow. But they ended up expanding it to 500 feet. It was 200, so essentially 2.5 times more spaced out than it was previously. The discussion through the time of their moratorium on issuing new permits, they spent a lot of time talking about that distance, what the distance would be. I I meant to talk to Walt, but I actually haven't seen Walt since they passed this. What ended up pushing them over the edge to get them to 500 feet, that's the distance, but I know when they were having those conversations, they were discussing that distance relative to city blocks. Essentially how many could fit on a block. Whether they were okay with that or not. They also beefed up their code provisions regarding having somebody nearby to respond if there's an issue, which I believe we spoke. I don't, maybe not at length, but that was a big topic of discussion back in March when we first were talking about our vacation rental codes. And they really, any city really, but McMinnville implemented that change so that they can guarantee that there's someone who can respond if there are issues, which of course will help to minimize or at least hold the property owners accountable for the behavior of their occupants. Now I'm gonna be shouting at you all. Those were the two big changes in my legal mind, which isn't always the lens that everybody shares and witnessed. There's a particular mindset. But those were kind of the two biggies. And McMinnville had an issue which was ongoing when we last discussed this, regarding how their code was being interpreted and whether a particular applicant met the criteria or not. So that is just a good example of we want to be as specific as we can so that we can hold people accountable without needs, which is always a goal on your behalf. That was a lot of words without saying much, but are there any questions?
Is that about a city block?
I believe so, but I'll defer to Gordon now.
It's a little bit longer, but that would essentially mean you're only going to have one per block. That's what it does for you.
What does it? Do we have an average block length in Carlton? It seems like ours are pretty
You see
varied.
a lot of them around 250,
Yeah,
but there are others that are longer. You know, where there's a street missing or where the street network is a little bit funky. You'll see longer ones.
as we're going into some of the newer subdivisions, it's a little more regular,
A little bit.
but
Yeah.
not always. Okay,
Not always because of the layout of the property and
okay,
what they can fit into it. You know, that the property doesn't always suit itself to a grid system.
mhm.
Some of them do, some of them don't.
And distance measured by feet is not the only way that we could require spacing if we wanted to have a certain number of parcels as a buffer.
Mhm.
Would maybe be a way to account for the irregularity.
So we could, if we wanted to, we could say something like 5 households apart. So that would be like one door, the door number 6 to door number 11.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the term household, but yes, we could
Lots.
define it in that way.
Long.
So there are, you know, at minimum 5 lots.
Like I've said before, for some reason here in Carlton, vacation rentals, not all of them, but there are definitely clusters. Yeah. Why, I don't know, but
But McMinnville is a bigger city, right? Carlton's a lot smaller, so if you're going 500, might not make sense for us, because we are much, much smaller.
On your layout, I don't think.
Yeah.
I agree. Is there a way that we could exclude a certain zone? That if we found a zone close to downtown that was more advantageous for vacation rentals, is there any reason why we couldn't do that? If it was requested from property owners?
Depending on what you mean, Counselor, by zone, if we are talking about zone in the land use sense of R1, R2, R3, we have to have different spacing requirements based on the different zoning. It would be more complicated if it was, we were trying to, excuse me, identify a new zone, air quotes, zone. That would probably be more involved, actually. Maybe that's half a question for Scott. But a tidier way to, that might be to implement some type of overlay so that certain parts of the city have different spacing requirements. You have that fine.
Yeah, an area one that has a denser package area.
But I think that would then entail comp plan changes and all that.
I'm not trying to make anybody's job harder.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Tyler is correct. Yeah, there is, you can limit the use to the zone. Establish some things here. I think one of the things that Tyler mentioned in his report was sometimes you create non-conforming situations too. So we gotta be aware of what you might be regulating, especially with introducing a distance standard that they are already clustered together. And you may have some that if they run out of time, I would think, because the code is structured right now, if I'm not mistaken, to not go flow with ownership. So if somebody sells, they would, maybe if their distance requirement, then they might not approve. So just sort of thinking out loud.
So some of the distancing might not be immediately noticed because people already have approved vacation rentals. But we could, but we'll make it. Yeah, we can do lots of bad stuff and get sued after.
That's not really advised.
Generally not there.
Yeah.
So the intent would be to grandfather in everything that we have moving forward.
Depending on, in particular, what rule we're talking about, yes, some vacation rentals may be grandfathered in to be allowed where they wouldn't be allowed as the applicant. I think some of the more policy type requirements would apply to current vacation rental.
Such as parking spaces for bedrooms.
That one would probably be difficult to apply to current permit holder, but like a requirement for having a contact person in a certain geographic location, which I think we already have that going, so maybe that wasn't very easy. But source of requirements that wouldn't require a change to the property itself. Okay. For the day-to-day functioning of the vacation rental regulations.
We talked about this in March. Well, council was interested in what the McMinnville was going to do and what the outcome would be. Controversy. It was thought that at that time, perhaps there wasn't a problem with vacation rentals at the current point in time, but then we wanted to be proactive and put some parameters on short-term rentals. With that in mind, is distance requirement something that council wants to proceed with at this time or at a later point in time. Consider it should vacation rentals become more popular.
What are we seeing now in terms of vacation rental growth in the city?
Still at that 3% roughly, give or take. The amount of new homes being built definitely far outweighs the amount of vacation rental. So it's going to keep our ratios low. It doesn't stop the clustering type effect, but it's keeping our numbers relatively low. Once we start leveling off with our home building, then probably continue to.
So this would actually be a pretty good time to consider doing that.
How many VRs are coming about in the subdivision?
In the subdivisions or throughout the city?
I'm thinking Carlton Crest and JR Meadows. I keep thinking those are just all houses, but I learned they're not.
As of right now, I don't believe there is, there's one pending in JR one.
Okay.
Nothing in JR two and nothing in Carlton Crest. Most of it is centrally located.
Okay.
Some of the HOAs prohibit them. And so Carlton Crest specifically prohibits HOAs, or the HOA specifically prohibits
Vacation
vacation
rental.
rentals in Carlton Crest.
Can we set a threshold, like if we hit 5%, then the space requirements after the 5%? I mean, is that a weird way of doing it?
Yes, but I would use it more of if council agrees on a percentage, 5%, 10%, 15%, whatever the percentage is. That's the trigger that then the team brings this back to council as a reminder. This is when you wanted to relook at your vacation goals, so to see.
We've been hovering between 2.8, 3.1 for the last years.
In my opinion, it doesn't sound like there's a huge problem right now. I don't know if we even necessarily have to set parameters. Couldn't we just rely on staff to communicate that with council? If you're feeling overburdened or you're saying, hey, we have this huge influx, we need to make this an agenda item to talk about.
Certainly, and if it becomes, if we do our work and you meet your goal 2.4 development policies now, and yet it comes back up in a year, 2 years, 5 years, again, council wants to set as a goal because council's feeling again that vacation rentals might be a concern. Absolutely. Or as you said, staff would say, we're seeing quite an influx, 15% of our housing stocks.
Like the idea of setting a percentage, so it's like over around 3% now, to say, as an example, if it's just 5% or 7% that we come back.
So do we have an accurate number for totals of houses?
We just use the census data that is provided by the federal.
How old is that?
The last update was 2020.
So this is
3 years.
both for city that's growing. Like we are new houses and stuff.
They do an annual update, so they take that number, the Portland State University is a population estimate, lead houses. So we provide the additional house numbers every year being built. So we have the 2020 household numbers. We can add subsequent years after. We have the data.
But right now it's 2020.
3% data, the information is off of the 2022 data. Number of houses.
The 2022 data.
That I've created. So I took
Yeah.
the 2022 census information and added the PSU information for the 2021 and 2022. It's not posted. Right, so
So
that's
you,
it. I have the total number of houses. I don't have it information here in the packet, but that's how I got. the figures.
I think that if the number doubles to 6%, then maybe maybe as a council, we should look at this again because 6% would be a doubling of the rentals. At that point in time, it would be probably wise to look at it.
Right, I'm up for just having a cap now, why having another discussion? We're having discussion now, so let's decide it now, instead of, like, let's think about it later.
Counselor,
I need a
Councilor
little more info. Do we have any feedback from our citizens in terms of complaints about parking and noise and too close, too many? Is there any situations going on in the city?
Not that I know of, the police department might have more information, but there have been no complaints filed with my part of it on the city side. When it comes to receiving comments, it's probably 9 times out of 10, we don't get any comments during the public comment period that neighbors can respond to.
Right.
There's only been a handful of times where we've received comments.
what are the pros and cons of making a decision now and as waiting?
So the pro would be that we get whatever, specifically talking about a cap on the total number or on the ratio. Is that we're establishing that well ahead of when we actually are getting close to that cap, so we can
Nip it in the bud?
essentially, yeah. If we wait until it's a problem, then we might be stuck with that problem. With limited tools to address it. I think the primary con of looking too far out and setting any regulations is it's a bit of a shot in the dark about what issues specifically will crop up and whether the framework that we've implemented addresses those concerns.
The other con that I have seen, that it could be a pro or a con, you create a market. Because the license is not transferable. So Mayor, if you ever wanted to have the ability to consider using your house for vacation cap, you'd want to apply for it now, and therefore you artificially inflate because you create a market.
Can we write it in a way that people can't do that? Like they have to start whatever, we got vacation right now, in the
So-
future.
I lived in a community that tried to do that. That is incredibly administratively difficult to monitor because reports are filed quarterly and it takes time for the information to come in. There are people who say that they're using it as a vacation rental, but maybe not taking in monies. So you've got to figure out the number of days that they're doing it. It becomes incredibly administratively difficult to police and sit on every vacation rental to see if they're actually using the license.
And jumping off on that concern as a sort of proxy to requiring people to utilize their property as a vacation rental as soon as it's implemented would be to establish a high fee to have the vacation rental permit.
That's what I was
So
gonna say.
there's much less incentive to sit on their approval for 20 years.
Right, just to bring that up. Time, I'd like to see that happen, you know, and it would, I think, help to alleviate the problem we're talking about, so.
It would help to alleviate the problem, and I've seen that in action where in the city that referring to, they actually had a cap. And there were people who didn't want any more vacation rentals, so they actually took the vacation rental license so that there was one less for somebody else to use. Which then the city was then shorted the lodging tax for that. And we did raise it to a certain point that some, but not all, relinquished their license.
So that's why you see other communities having over this 2026. or I would assume that's why they have it that high.
Which page is that?
Maybe
Page one.
pick one. Or
City of McMinnville is,
four.
nope, 1,230.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we should have a big application fee and also an annual. We would have to make money in order to pay for it, to make sense.
And I won't speak for Tyler, but I know a previous city attorney said it has to be rationally proportionate. You can't just set a fee. It has to
Yeah.
be within reason. Otherwise, it goes into the classification of bad things that people sue us for later.
So is the rationale based on the money they could take in a year or something like that? How
It's
do you
based on
rationally
the
do it?
cost to the city.
To administrative.
Oh, that,
Yeah,
yes,
we're taking thousands of dollars and it costs us $100 to do.
yeah. So how is Newburgh doing $2,000 worth of admin?
That is just their initial application fee.
Mhm.
So that probably takes into account all of the staff time in processing and approval. Newburgh also has one of the larger notification zones. So they have to notice more properties when an application is received.
Mhm.
And maybe their staff time is just really, really expensive.
Right.
Don't know for certain.
Then the $50 annual fee is what they pay each year to renew the license?
Yes.
So these other cities, it doesn't seem like they're putting a cap on it. They're looking, or at least McMinnville, it's just the distance is their control method. I know right now we're talking about a cap, but there's also the distance that could be an option. There's other options to limit it if that's the direction we're trying to go. I do get a little bit nervous putting a cap on something, like you said, throwing a shot in the dark of like, oh, 5%, 6%, we don't really know what's, again, we're not really talking about an issue right now. I do want to be forward thinking, you know what I mean, but also we don't really have a problem right now. So we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, in my opinion.
I think the biggest thing that could be some people will respond to issues. From what I understand, it's
Right. Yeah, I was specifically talking about the cap and
Yeah.
limiting things, like we still haven't talked about parking spots, things like that.
To add on to your comment about distance and also clustering is, in my experience, you will always, unless there is the distance requirement that's enforced, you will always have clustering, just based upon the nature of the business. If you go to Colorado Springs, you're gonna wanna be closer to the ski resort. So the homes closer to the ski resort are gonna be clustered and should have more vacation rentals. If you're going to Cape Cod, you're gonna want something closer to the water, or you're gonna want something closer to the walkability to town. So you're gonna have that clustering. It's a natural outcome, consequence of business.
And I don't see that as a negative, really. I mean, in my opinion, we want to be close to the action. So if you put a limit on 100 feet, then you isolating the downtown area where people congregate. People want to come to vacation to visit the attractions. So yeah, and I think that putting a cap on something, absolutely, I don't think raising a fee to some astronomical price is fair. To stop somebody, a property owner, from saying, well, you're gonna cap this, I might as well apply now. I think we might be creating a problem if we go start putting some impositions on people and property owners versus like slowing down a little bit, allowing staff to communicate with us, addressing some of these other things.
My thought about having a higher application fee and then changing how, having the annual, changing from what we have right now in terms of the annual fee is not to be punitive, but just to reinforce that landlords are serious about what they're doing. And so, and I think we definitely have some room to do that.
I get, yeah, I agree in a way. I mean, it's also, I mean, it's their property, you know what I mean? So they have rights to their property and how they want to use it as
Well,
well.
no, I'm talking about the application, if they want to have a rental, the application fee right now is $350. Just for sake of argument, $500. And then the annual fee to renew it, because right now we're treating it as part of a regular business license as opposed to through a special business license for short-term rentals, separate from the business license.
Shannon, I have a question for you that I'm asking for everybody's benefit. In your other city manager role, did you experience more issues with the sort of more isolated vacation rentals or with clusters of vacation rentals? Part of, I think there is a certain benefit to having the clusters because if a vacation rental abuts a vacation rental, they're less likely to be upset with each other for partying until 3 a.m.
The city that, in my experience, the houses were close enough, it didn't matter. If they were partying and throwing off fireworks, the whole town heard it, regardless.
And these vacation rentals fall underneath all the same rules that our residents fall underneath, right? Okay.
Well, here's a question, and I guess, I don't know if it's off the wall or not. How many complaints, behavioral complaints do we get right now with the vacation rentals that we do have? Do we know? Have any idea?
I know the police department has gotten some noise complaints,
Yeah, some,
but not an egregious
nothing.
amount.
Okay. That's a,
It's usually bachelorette.
well, I mean, I called on one of the houses behind us one time, but that was like 5 years ago and there's never been a problem since, so. That's why I was wondering, they all seem to be pretty well behaved. I was wondering if that was a chronic complaint or a problem around here
No
or
chronic,
how.
spontaneous.
Yeah, so it looks like, does the city of McMinnville not require them to be a licensed business? I see that they have a short-term rental renewal fee. Maybe that's something that we, could implement, like I think Councilor President Bowman was mentioning, like an STR renewal fee separate from the business license of $200 or something. But it doesn't, I mean, in the little boxes here on page 4 and 5, it did. Would assume they have to have a business license in City of McMinnville or no?
I don't know for certain, Councilor Skipper, that is a good question, but we could certainly implement either in addition to or in lieu of the business license, we could have a particular for a vacation rental license. I would sort of assume that with McMinnville, they don't require a business fee, that the STR renewal fee is in lieu of annual business license.
Which in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, might be easier on staff versus, because I think we still mail out stuff to businesses to re-register versus, well, I guess you're probably still mailing something out, never mind, talking something out. Thought maybe it would save some staff time, but
Hearing a general interest to look at raising the application fee as well as the renewal fee, would you like the team to go look into some reasonable comparisons from other cities and bring that back to you at the next meeting?
I would.
And we also have inspection.
So inspections, this is something I've got a little experience with. Inspections can get very tricky because we don't have a building inspector on staff. And so we don't have anybody qualified to really speak to the building code. So my previous city did require inspections, and my city attorney was very concerned about our liability because we're sending essentially untrained staff in to evaluate building code compliance. It puts the city in a very tenuous situation.
What if you require the person to do the inspection? Like they hire their own company. They have to have an approved inspection.
Well, I would have one comment on inspections, just, and, you know, I should probably clarify, I do take care of a short-term rental. So I'm seeing a lot of the stuff that goes on there. And one thing I would say is that probably the short-term rentals are better maintained than regular homes, because if those people are letting anything get run down, they get rated, they get reported on short-term rental programs. And the guests are not kind if they're not happy. So there is a built-in impetus for those vacation rentals to keep themselves in really good shape. They were probably in better shape than most of the old houses in town.
So it's a self-policing community.
Anyway, yeah.
That makes sense, okay.
And to respond to Councilor Brandau's question about requiring a third-party inspection, that would probably not be reasonable if we were inspecting for like structural safety type stuff. Because that's not going to change year to year. So that would probably be a new burden. And I don't actually know how many third-party inspectors there are. But we have to be reasonable in what we're wanting to look at every year. So if we're trying to make sure that, you know, they have accessible windows in each of the dwelling parts of the home, or I can't off the top of my head think of what else we were doing. That's probably more of something that would be analyzed at the initial application stage. And then the renewal inspection type stuff would be more like fire extinguishers, having the contact information posted that they have posted. But people don't like having government officials in their houses. Spot.
County assessor. Can deny access.
If we had an enforceable ordinance that required annual inspections, we would probably be able to revoke their permit if they didn't allow the inspection. But in general, yes, property owners can refuse to allow us onto their property if we're just going on willy-nilly, which is a legal phrase.
But if they're running it as a vacation rental, that's kind of as a business. So what does that do to the?
Unless we have a specific concern or our code allowed or required certain inspections, they could probably deny access, and we could possibly restructure our framework so that they would have to allow us, but then we get into the concerns of having potentially non-professional trained staff members making professional opinions that they should. And then related to that, it's not building inspection type issues. That would just be a lot of staff time. And the city staff is, are you guys kind of busy?
So we heard a report on how many complaints of partiers or noise complaints. Have we had any complaints of building issues, like actual structural? Like stairs are missing, windows are out, no issues at all?
Most people, when they submit their applications, I ask for the site plan, they're like, can I send pictures? They're very excited to send pictures,
Mhm.
the inside and the outside, to walk around, even if it's just.
They,
Okay.
because
Because they get
VRBO
online
and
and
all
it
of
shows
all of those companies do ratings, and
Yeah.
they're one of the things when people rent through
Yeah.
those I think the renters are almost required to send in a report.
Yeah, you want to show
Yeah,
off
they
that
don't
it's
wanna mess
safe and
around.
clean, but maybe just reminding them to have a fire extinguisher and that contact info is about all we can do for safety.
I have a question here. It looks like we are trying to also address, are we trying to address the housing and livability tonight?
We are, and I was actually, thank you, I was gonna get, one goal thing is notification, nobody's mentioned notification so far, what I was gonna suggest is that you had an opinion on notification, what we could do is go back, look at application fees and renewal fees, bring this back to you next month with those changes for further discussion, and also further discuss parking at that point in time. But I did not hear anybody mention any concern about the notification.
We bumped that up to 250.
50 feet.
Cause that's basically one of our blocks, right, on average-ish? It'd be nice to know if there's something going in on the block.
I think,
Could we look into that and bring that back at the next meeting?
That's what I'm, yeah, can we look into it? I'm sorry, not can we, but can we look into it? What would it take? What would be the impact on the staff, so on and so forth? Thank you.
Amy, are applicants required to provide you with the names and addresses of all the property owners?
yeah, so it's not really they are required as part of the application to provide those mailing addresses. Go over that window,
Oh, okay.
so it's just more envelopes.
And how do they determine that? Do they like do like a little Google's map thing and figure out a circle? I mean, how do they?
Most of them go to a title company or the assessor's office, and they just kind of make the property the center, and then they just circle around it,
Okay,
and they all the addresses, the properties fall in there, they put them on a spreadsheet.
submit to you. Okay, perfect.
Thank you for that segue.
Okay,
I had just one quick question. As we talk about these vacation rentals, we seem to sort of be talking about separate houses. Do we also have this methodology for just a single bedroom rented in a house?
They still have to do the vacation rental permit, whether
Okay.
it's a full house or bedroom. There's only one property in the city that offers just a two bedroom. They started renting that before we implemented.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. That'll give council time to review the parking, because I know there's quite a few that time I was able to.
I wanted to scare you guys away from being like Salem. That's why I
okay, that'll work. Item 2.
Could I just make one quick comment on page 6? So we talked about inspection. That might be real inspection. It says the purpose of an inspection in our current maybe development code. The purpose of an inspection is to ensure the health and safety.
That's actually a modification that I made, and I did not catch that. I apologize. For the red line. And the purpose,
I mean, I'm reading it, but what are you saying, Sharon, that you missed?
to remove the inspection part of it. That was an oversight on my part, sorry.
Okay. So part two, April 4th.
Page 6, so yes. April 4th, you had a work session to discuss the council rule of identifying of opportunities to maintain promoting green space wherever practical and the update of the development. code. You received a presentation from city planner White. And he's here just to quickly introduce it, just if that was included in your package, just as a refresher, because it's been a couple months since they came. And then I will hand it over to city planner White to then introduce,
Shannon. Members of the city council, part of your packet included the PowerPoint from April. I'm not gonna go through that again, so yeah. And I will just though bring up this slide that was part of the packet there that sort of talked about what is green space and when I presented the slide, it was pretty much a matter of green. This is green space related to open space that's for passive and recreational purposes. But Gordon's going to talk about another type of green space. One that is related to stormwater and the low impact design alternatives that he'll explain in a lot better ability than I can possibly do it. As he's an engineer and knows all of these techniques out in the field where they've been introduced. There's some cities that have codified them. Others have kind of said, gee, we sort of like that approach, but we don't want to codify it. And so I've seen Gordon's presentation to the planning commission. It was well received. And he is here tonight to present to the city council. So Gordon,
Okay, where is it on the thumb drive? That's it. Okay. So I'm gonna scoot up here so I can see what's, oh, okay. So this is a presentation that I gave to the planning commission. It was more about stormwater in general and what's in the code and what's not. So there's probably some of this that I'm gonna go through quickly because it's not specifically about green space, but it's still good stuff to know about stormwater. It's a big issue and complex issue. So anyway, that's sort of the big picture of what happens before and after construction. And before you got water coming down, goes into the canopy. Some of it goes off the surface, some of it goes below surface, some of it's evaporation. And then after, you can see the arrow that's surface runoff is a lot bigger. So that's what happens in development. That portion of it gets bigger. That's what we want to deal with. General Oregon drainage law, probably something just to understand. It's not codified. It's case law. And the generally accepted interpretation, drainage can flow where it does right now. So if this is a lot, the drainage goes out that corner, it can continue to do that forever. You can't block that. So upstream, downstream, somebody can't pour a concrete dam and stop it. You can discharge to any natural drainage way. So if the land is such that it forms a drainage way, well, you can discharge there because that's natural. Drainage ways cannot be altered unless you get agreement downstream. So if, again, we're flowing and it goes out that door onto the next property, you want to develop, you say, hey, I want to send it this way. Now you just impacted your neighbor. You change the direction of the flow, potentially the amount. They got to be okay with it. So that's,
Do both of them have to be okay with it?
Yep.
So the one where, that you're taking the drainage off from and the one that you're adding it onto?
Yep.
They both have to agree
you
to it.
both have to. You can't impact that other property unless they say, yeah, okay, I'd rather have flow over here than over there. It doesn't bother me. If it bothers them, you can't do it. So that's, case law means anybody can bring a lawsuit and change this, but that's generally what it says. Development code, so we're updating the development code, but right now actually the purpose is to minimize erosion and the degradation of water quality. The scope really is how do we move that water without causing damage. These were specific questions. What does maximum practical extent mean? And that's actually a reasonableness assumption. So you can say, well, you could put more treatment on there, you could put more, you could put more, you could put more, but it becomes unreasonable. So right now, that's what the code says, and it's kind of wishy-washy. It's hard to enforce. Same thing with substantially free of pollutants. How do you measure that? We can't measure that. And I'll get into treatment later, just show you how that's dealt with. The other one was just hypo sedimentation. If you don't know what that is, that just means the flow is going slow enough that now the solids settle out. So that's sedimentation. Things not in the code: treatment, detention, LID, DEQ permits, and we also reference dry wells, French drains. So all of those things are going to be fixed. We're going to require treatment and detention. We're going to reference LID and permits. Just so you know, dry wells, you guys know what those are? Okay, just think of a big pit in the ground and you stuff all your stormwater in there and it infiltrates into the ground. Usually it's a manhole, but it could be a pit. DEQ says that's your last option. You got to look at everything else before you do that.
What about French drains then?
French drains, typically we don't use those in a public system. Usually
Oh,
that's used like somebody put in a little retaining wall in their backyard. So they put a French drain
around the
behind-
base of my house.
Right. So they're typically not a public system.
Okay.
Design standards, purpose really right now is to deal with the volume of stormwater and to convey it to either a public or a natural drain as design criteria evaluation. Again, that'll be changed to add treatment and detention. That's all because of the mercury TMDL, going to require it. So we're doing it proactively.
Gordon, I have a question that I should know the answer to, but retention versus detention.
Right, so detention is, think of like a bottle. Water goes in and the only way you let it out is if you drink, right? That's detention. Retention is if I had a hole in the bottom. Now I put water in and some of it's going down, it's draining down, which would be to the soil. And then you can also drink out of it. So that's the difference between the two. Detention, you're holding it and then letting out at a certain rate. Retention, you're holding it, letting out at that rate, but at the same time, letting it infiltrate into the ground.
So basically, like our reservoir, it goes in, goes out at a speed.
Detention, yeah. So, and usually for stormwater, you let it come in real fast. And then you have a little orifice on the outside. So it goes out at a slower rate. That's,
Meter it.
you don't actually meter it. There's no meter on it,
Yeah.
but you're limiting. it. So
That's
they,
what,
yeah. Okay. This is a big deal. So, and this is standard. This is not just Carlton. You see this every single city. Their design standard says, here's the design storm you have to design for. And you can see the different areas. But the big takeaway from this is that it implies that you are going to have flooding. You are not mitigating all flooding. Reasons for that, if you tried to mitigate all the flooding, the cost of that system is just going to be out the roof. It's going to be huge, not going to have room for it. And then most of the time, it's not going to work well. It's way too oversized. And then it also will disrupt your natural cycle. So anyway, that's the takeaway, is that we're trying to mitigate a certain amount of flooding, but not all.
Does years mean
So 10-year design storm, so that is a reoccurrence level. So
Every 10 years.
every 10 years, you assume you're gonna get a storm that's this big. It could happen 2 years in a row, but there's a way to calculate this is that size of storm. Design standards on detention. Right now, we only require detention on a few instances, commercial, industrial, multifamily parking lots. So we don't use it very often right now. It's gonna change.
You mean government regulation wise, that's gonna change, or?
It's going to be required through the TMDL, so we are going to change it to say you are doing
Okay.
detention. Or retention, one or the other.
So there's gonna be that requirement, so we're gonna be
We're
addressing
gonna
it.
have that requirement. We're in process of changing both code design standards. So the other thing to keep in mind, storm drainage is case by case. So we have to give them options. Not all options can be done in every single instance. Stormwater is very dependent on soil, the contours, the lay of the land, where is the existing system or the natural drainages. So you have to give them options so they can work with what they have. The existing system is patchwork. And that is normal. Not like a water system where you got a water treatment plant and everything gets treated and then that goes out to every single residence. So it's all got to be connected. Wastewater, everything's got to be connected so it goes down to the treatment. It's not like that. You're going to wherever there is existing system or natural drainage. So it's here, there, all over the place. And that's, you see that in every single city. You have multiple discharge points, Carlton. And I just list there some of the places that it goes to. So if somebody looks at it and complains, why don't you have this overall? Nobody has that. But nobody want, you know, wastewater, if you can't get to the treatment plant, pump it there. And that's expensive. Stormwater, you don't want to pumping it around all over the place if it can flow by gravel. So that's why it's natural. These are detention facilities that we do have. And they're there because there's a few times and places it's required. Same deal with treatment. We have a few, Like Roosevelt, that was required by the funding agency, not by us. So HUD said, hey, you're gonna use our money, you're gonna build treatment. The permit, requirement on Fourth Street, that was because of a state permit impacting wetlands. Okay. Code changes, all driven right now by Mercury TMDL. We're gonna have treatment, we're gonna have detention, we're gonna allow LID, we're gonna reference DEQ. So one thing to note on treatment. It's an assumption. So if you use a BMP, best management practice, is what that stands for. If you use one of those methods, it's assumed that the treatment's working. There's no figuring out what's coming in, what's going out. There's no testing. If you set those up correctly, it's assumed, it's presumptive that it works. We already talked about that. Traditional versus LID. Traditional is collect it, detain it, treat it, discharge it. So you got catch basins, pipes, you collect everything, take it down and discharge it in one location. LID, low impact development. Sometimes they put an A on the back end of that. So LID or LIDA, it's the same thing. So this tries to more closely mimic nature. So you're trying to put the water back into the ground where more closely to where it fell. So your pipe is carrying less. So you have less impact on the discharge. These are very, very much soil dependent because part of that is infiltration. And if you've got clay soil, it's not going to infiltrate. So that part of your LID doesn't work. So, well, I put this in, I'm not going to read it off. Scott gave this to me, it's from Beaverton. It's a very good definition. I think you guys have this, read through it. But one of the key points near the end is that it's not suitable for every site. So we can't go in and just mandate you're going to use LID because it may not work. So one of the control options, there's the detention, retention. So that's the same, except it includes infiltration. There's underground detention. I don't like that as a public. I don't care if private wants to use it. They often do. They want to put it under their parking lot because it saves them space. But for us, we have to maintain it, and they're hard to maintain, like they're under the street. And now that becomes confined space entry.
This is like a well underneath the,
It's like a big pipe. Think of it, you know,
Okay.
like 60-inch pipe underneath the street.
yeah, okay.
That's now, I've seen these put in, people don't maintain them, they fill up, they never do what they're supposed to do because it's so hard to maintain. So as a public, I don't like that. Infiltration, that actually does, you know, that's retention essentially. And anything that has infiltration is actually an LID option. So treatment. So here it is again, it's presumptive. If you design the facilities according to the criteria, they're presumed to work. It's not like a treatment plant for water or wastewater where you say, this is coming in, I got to treat specifically for that. And then I'm going to test it on the outside to see. Part of the problem is there are thousands of things that could come in. So how do you actually do that reasonably? You can't. So, and And there was a bunch of studies that DEQ did on this to come to this. It wasn't just, we're gonna do it. They did a lot of evaluation. There's hard filters. So what is that? That means like a concrete tank in the ground and you got a little filter. That once a year you take it out, put a new one. So that's a hard facility. Then there's natural treatment. So we'll get into some of that. So here's some of the natural treatment. So you got ponds, you got swales, you got rain gardens, planters. Those are pictures. Ideal pictures. So keep that in mind. So, but obviously very weighty. So, you know, if we get LID that works, it can be green space. Here's some more of them. An actual wetland, a dry basin. So that's one where, you know, it rains, it fills up, and then it all goes away. You have to have very specific plans. Landscape filters, so that's parking lot. Instead of having a curb there, no curb, and it flows across the ground into this filter, which is plants. And you're using those plants to filter that rainwater.
I have a question on that. Are there particular plants that you're
Yes.
supposed to use?
That's all in the design criteria. It's very particular plants. You can't just plant anything. So green roofs. So that's, you know, the roof of your building, you essentially plant it. So the rainwater is that. Pervious pavement. So that's an option where instead of having a pavement where everything just runs off and is collected, you allow it to infiltrate. And there's various ways of doing this. This is just showing one picture. Again, you gotta have the right soil. So, and they can't use everywhere because of structure. Like, there's no way you put that on Main Street. It's gonna break down, right? Okay. So this really depicts all the elements of LID. So this is a planter, but from the side, you see, you know, you got impervious surfaces, flow goes into the planter. There's something green there that's using all that water. And there's room there for storage. So there's soil underneath and there's room up above so you can fill up that basin where the planters, where the plants are located. In this instance, it also shows at the bottom the infiltration. And then you'll see that white pipe goes down, turns gray, and goes off the side. So that's if that gets too high, it just overflows, now goes into your storm system. So not all of it is infiltrated. So it's both runoff and infiltration. So that shows you the elements of LID. There's retention and there's also runoff. There's uptake. That's just shows you landscape filter, what that kind of looks like. There's a swale option. Here's a green roof. So on the left, it shows that's how it's built. So you're essentially putting soil up on top of the roof. So pretty much you can't retrofit most buildings, right? Because even if that's 9 inches to a foot of soil, that's a lot of load that structure was not designed for. Then you put the water on top of that. It really gets heavy. So if we're gonna allow those, I don't think we can end it. If we allow them, they have to know about it before they build the building. To the right shows what happens if you don't do maintenance. Everything dies. Now, it's still doing a little detention, so it's still helping your storm drainage, but the green space value of it just went away.
By the Newburgh Library. Very much looks.
Right.
Dead.
So here's some other
Stop that street.
LID.
Yeah.
information. Scott gave me these photos, so he knows about these ones, but the one over to the left, the property owners at some point thought, you know, I don't like the landscaping out there, I'd rather have rocks. So they ripped out the LID because they didn't know it. So they put in rocks. On the right, you see where it just wasn't maintained and all of it's died. And I will tell another story just because I love it. So there is one community in Oregon that loves to be on the edge of anything new. They love it. I won't tell you who. And so 10, 15 years ago, they did a big project, LID, on one of their electors, so big street. And just last year, there was a presentation at the APWA conference. It had all failed.
Oh, no.
They tore it all out. And they put in new LID, designed such that maintenance would be easy. So it all failed because maintenance failed. So that's the big issue with LID, if you're gonna do it, and I think we allow it. But there's a lot of maintenance. And I'll get to it a little later. I'll talk about maintenance. Here's more options. Tree preservation. Trees are great. Of course, if the tree is dying, do you really want to preserve it? But if the tree is really nice, do you? And do we codify that in some way? And does that mean that we are willing as a city to say, oh my gosh, that's the best oak I've ever seen. I'm going to reroute the street.
Yeah.
So we no longer have a grid system. It doesn't match the TSP, all of that stuff, but we kept that tree. And I've done that in Malala. You know, they were gonna, do this big improvement on the street, and the public works director said, well, there's a big oak there and everybody in town knows it. So, you gotta take the steps. So I got hold of an arborist. And he said, oh yeah, I do this all the time. It's always more cost effective to cut it down. But I'll go out and look at it. And then I got a call. This is the best oak I have ever seen. We rerouted the street. So if you're gonna do tree preservation, or you want us to look at, there's lots of details of how you do that. But that's one of the things that you gotta think about, is that what are the other consequences of that? And that's one of them.
Does that slow traffic down, Gordon?
It does.
They ran into the tree.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no trees, slow traffic.
Yeah, they do. The really big ones really slow them down.
Yes, we had opportunities to do that here.
Yeah,
We didn't do it.
right. And a developer's not gonna do that unless we're saying, we have tree preservation in our code,
Yeah.
Yes.
and we don't.
That's true.
Rainfall harvesting is another method of dealing with stormwater. I do this at my house, by the way. I got big tanks under my gutters. And I store water, and in the summertime, that's how I water my garden. Well, do we allow that? Believe it or not, there are some states, I think Colorado, that outlaws.
Why?
They say that's water's state, that's our water,
Oh,
because they're so short of
Oh.
water.
yeah.
It should
because
all
they're
be run
interfering
off
with
to
it.
the street.
They needed to.
It's
run off to
interfering with the
river.
road.
I think we're okay with that here. Okay, on that. So right now, what do? We clean out catch basins, either hand dig it or vacuum it out. Sometimes we jet pipes if they're totally plugged up. We remove sedimentation from detention ponds, but we don't actually do that very often. Not sure that we've done that. So LID is totally different than what Public Works is used to doing. They're used to doing this other stuff, fixing pipes, cleaning catch basins. O&M on LID is landscape maintenance. So you're not gonna take your guys or gals that know how to fix a pipe and say, you gotta figure out what plant to replace that with. I don't know. So that's one of the impacts of this is, okay, we're gonna allow this, we gotta figure out how are we gonna maintain it. You know, private facilities, you tell them to make. Public facilities, we make. And so how do you pay for it? Right now, we don't have a stormwater fee. So we do not collect money to do any O&M. And you're gonna have O&M because the Mercury TMDLs says you're gonna do treatment and detention. So it's coming. Right now, and I'm not positive, but I think that all of the like catch basin cleaning is coming out of the street fund more than likely. So at some point, this is something that city's got to take a look at. How do we fund this O&M? How do you pay for the facilities? Well, we do have SDCs. The interesting thing about SDCs is you get them after something is built. And usually you needed to build something before it was built. So the timing is odd, but once you build up some SDCs, you can be proactive about that. There are not very many loans or grants for storm drainage. So that's just the reality. Most of them are set up for this one. Development does pay for the facilities on their development. So we'll get that. Well, I rushed through that, but.
It didn't feel rushed.
Okay. So. Question. Any,
The ones in front of a house, the homeowner is supposed to maintain those, right?
so that is an issue. So if we got an LID that's in, you know, between the curb and the sidewalk, that is a specific facility that has specific plants and it's got pipes underneath. And it is a constructed facility. I would suggest the city use. If we're just doing street trees, yeah, the property owner takes care of that. But they're not gonna know that they gotta clean out that LID. Or that when the plant dies, they have to get a specific plant put back in. They're not gonna know that.
Not unless we tell them.
Well, even if you tell them, I mean, how many times is that gonna happen? It's like learning new software. Somebody teaches it to you. It's like, oh, that's easy. You don't use it for 6 months. But, great.
Well, you don't tell them once.
Can you explain how that works, Gordon? How does, so my property starts behind the sidewalk. Now you're telling me I gotta take care of stuff in front of the sidewalk
So
in the,
typically, if there's a landscape strip that's between the sidewalk and the curb, it's usually grass. And there's a street tree or two. People just take care of it. It's like, that's my lawn. So
Right,
They
but
go
they're-
mow it, they trim the tree.
the obligation portion of it, is that in code somewhere?
I don't know if it's in code. Scott, do you know if it is anywhere? But that's,
Well, I don't know of it, but I know that that's a key issue, and the photographs that are up there give the Gordon or city of Dallas. It's kind of one of the problem areas that's been introduced. It's between that photo that was up there, it's between the curb and the sidewalk, landscape banner area. I think, you know, it's our responsibility for that. So responsible for, just as a lot of cities have it, you are to maintain the sidewalk as well. A lot of people don't know that. And there was some marginal education when that was introduced, but homeowners changed through time. I think through the water bill and other things, there's a little bit of education, but people don't read that stuff. And mostly it's, gee, I saw a bunch of weeds in there that the city wasn't willing to, you know, and I have no what to do, and it looks better with some rocks in there. And so it's just kind of more what the practice has been for that particular, for what's introduced in residential, especially in front of people's homes. Where it's been really well done, I mean, there's some other good pictures of Dallas that I could have shared, but some commercial properties.
Commercial district.
The hospital in Dallas did a really great job that they've included in an area that's kind of a common space treatment center for the patients. Yeah, there are some areas where if the maintenance is not a concern because it's a feature. Maybe some of the winery businesses would say, gee, this is how we are doing our bit with improving the water system or something like that, environmentally sensitive. It's not, it's pretty common, I think, in residential areas. It's just one of those things we're informing the council about as far as our observations.
right, so in residential areas, you're not going to teach them. It'd be just an ongoing. So if we're gonna do LID in a residential area, my suggestion would be, by the city, otherwise it won't be.
I like the idea of LID. I got a question though, like in lieu of green space. So, does that mean so a developer comes in and puts in LID and then now we don't get a park? Or are parks and stuff separate than green space?
So that's the big question. It's an excellent question. That's one that developers will ask if the code is silent on that sort of thing. The presentation that I provided council was on open space and what standards there are for passive versus active open space, and distinguishing what that, some codes distinguish what that is, some go into a percentage of it, and a passive might be something like an LID facility, detention area, some of those photographs you showed, and say to the developer, okay, yeah, percentage wise, engineering says that that's what they want to see, reducing detention to the draft code, and that would be the question is, well, how much of that can count as part of this new open space requirement that's your requirement? And it would be up to the council to kind of set that. We can give some examples of what cities have done, 50% or something like that. And there have been some good examples of including benches and other things like that. So it's sort of a passive, it's not just functionally a detention facility. It does act as kind of a nice open space area, but for active, we'd have to make sure you don't want to, we don't want to see people running and using it, playing in them because they have a function to it. So we'd have to kind of set some standards as to what percentage of open space can be utilized for one or the other, passive versus active.
Because from a developer standpoint, I could understand how that would be an attractive option versus doing the traditional stormwater detention. Certainly would be cheaper, in my opinion, so my fear is that if we don't take into account the active versus passive, we're gonna lose our open space to this LID. Because it's gonna be cheaper on the developer. In theory.
Yeah, it will be a question that's asked, on the onset. We would do like a pre-application conference before somebody comes in and actually applies for it. Typically, that's the question that gets asked is, oh, I'm required to do above ground detention. I've got this open space requirement, it's been introduced to the code, we're introducing it to the code. Yeah, exactly what, how much can I call that out as open space? Gordon said, like the underground detention, that's the other question that's asked, that if, well, what can I put the detention underground? And that's the.
So let me give you another perspective about what you're talking about. A colleague of mine actually went over to Sweden and to look at what they do for stormwater. And one of the things that they do is very specifically mix those two, the open space and the stormwater. So when it's raining and flooding, that area is your detention. When it's not, maybe that's your basketball. They do it very specific. So they're combining the two.
I hate to kind of cut off, but we're about 4 minutes out from, and just in case anybody needed to get up and move around, I think that we should wrap it up.
The team is looking for some direction, so how would you like we come back to the next meeting to talk about some direction? Because we need some direction from council about the council goal.
I think there's a lot more we have to discuss,
Yeah.
so we need to bring it back.
Here,
I'm sorry, you didn't hear me? I said, I think there's a lot more that we need to discuss regarding marine space, so we definitely, in my opinion, need to bring it back.
Do you need more information from the team?
Or you just discuss what's in here.
I just wanted to clarify if you were expecting something.
Yeah, we'll just have recommendations from board and staff about what should be best for the city. Then we can discuss that.
So there's some direction we've discussed before. We could do general direction, like, do you want to see tree preservation? Do you want to see green roofs? And then we could take that direction, that general direction, and provide some recommendations around that as we work with the development code, so that you're not having to spend an hour deciding what diameter of tree you want, which then turns into age, but.
I think that for me, the active versus passive is a big thing. Just for the reasons I pointed out of like. What are the pros and cons? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Like,
Okay,
I like the hybrid idea. That's interesting.
so we want, are you getting any direction out of that, Shannon?
I could use a little more clarity.
So for instance, tree preservation, you want something to be done about that. We can
Yes.
go to get all the details. You don't have to figure out the details. We may be able to preserve some, but not all, but
I think that's really important.
okay. So something in that direction, we can look at it now, bring details back.
Is that I've seen some knots. Okay, just checking in. Yeah.
Is there a program for putting in trees?
We do street trees right now.
Okay. Is there a requirement for trees at new residences that are going in?
That would be the street tree.
I mean, actually on the lot of the new house.
Oh. I don't think so.
But we can,
Not for single family residential. For multifamily, a landscape plan is required, so there are some standards, base standards for landscaping. I don't think that there's a agree a number of trees or anything like that, but. there's
Okay,
Some landscape.
maybe look at some landscaping options or tree options. Start there.
We have those now.
Okay. I'm trying to help, probably not doing a really
One of
poor
the things
job.
I was thinking about, it's gathering information about what other cities do for the stormwater treatment. Do they charge SCCs? Is it captured in a different fund? And that's another portion of this that we haven't really discussed is what
Yeah,
this is gonna cost.
okay. Got that one?
So I've got charges, fees, what other cities do. Still didn't get the landscape.
I think we can do that now, so maybe we just describe what we do. If that's good enough.
Okay.
Or, Kevin, when you were talking about passive, some of the things in here, you know, that too, like underground things that so folks can get around. You know, the requirement, but there's another aspect to it where, you know, like walkways and things like that that are not active. I mean, talk about it in here, that are not a park specifically, but.
Okay. Are you pulling anything out of that?
I guess when I say passive act, I'm thinking usable, like, you know what I mean?
Well, right, that's
Right?
all mine.
Like what you're saying, yeah.
Are you pulling anything out of that, Shannon?
So. We want additional options and requirements for usable.
So for instance, I think something like that would be if you had a really long block, we put a sidewalk mid-block, that type of thing. It's like 20 feet wide, you got a sidewalk, you got some plantings. That's a passive. And it's not being used for storm drainage, it's just adding some open space, really, some pedestrian walking paths.
Okay. We are going to call this meeting closed. So does anybody need a 5-minute break? It is Thursday, July 11th, and we are opening the July 11th meeting, regular session of the City Council. Would you call the roll, please? Here.
Council President Shirley Ward Bowen here. Council Dow.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
All of us in the county court,
Okay, please join with me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Ceremonies, appointments, announcements? Nothing? Okay. Citizen comments. This is the section of the agenda that allows members of the public to address the city council on any items off or on the agenda. When invited by the mayor, members of the public shall come forward, state their name and street address, and direct all comments to the mayor. Comments are typically limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is allowed by the mayor. We will start this comment section with any folks who have an item that to discuss that is not on the agenda.
For the site for Oregon.
Okay. She's not gonna be now, or she will be now?
She will be later. She's
Okay.
for the event.
Okay, okay, so we don't have anybody that wishes to address us now. Items that are on the agenda, anybody who has any comments on the agenda? No, okay. We will move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Can I ask some questions about consent agenda? I know
Um,
Christie is not here, but I'd like to ask some questions about the budget. And I think this is the last period of the year. That's why I have questions.
What regarding the budget?
I don't know if Ken can answer those questions. So. And the expense versus budget. In general ledger, I see. On some things like professional fees, for instance, in personal services. Professional fees is negative 91.60% up. And I just wonder if you have a reason why. Or if you have an understanding why that's so much higher than the budget.
Counselor, without being able to research this ahead of. Take this information.
Then my other question would be. On. Streets, the streets funds. On page 153. They're all over budget. Other than workers' compensation. Same thing with municipal court. I know we changed the judge, but. Maybe we didn't budget for that, seems like. Dues and subscription and most of the funds, I see a lot of increases. So if you get some information on those as well. Plus, I could go more, I could go for longer, but that should be sufficient.
Counselor, I would encourage you to send both Christie and I an email with your questions with the detailed account number and line item. So that we can research this and get it back to you. And I would encourage whenever anybody has any of these questions. To give it to us ahead of the meeting so that we can have these answers prepared.
And with that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All righty, down to ordinances, resolutions, discussion and action items. Item A, reservoir dredging closeout update and report.
Mayor and Council, we are closing out the raw water reservoir project. I'll say that 3 times fast. We've provided you a project summary of a lot of the items able to accomplish throughout this project, deliverables that weren't just related just to the dredging, but ancillary projects that were able to be done in addition to the dredging project. Thank you. And Gordon has a wonderful PowerPoint slide that does not involve me trying to say that sentence again.
Oops. Is that it?
So. I'm just gonna go over a little bit of the history on this. Well, and then tell you what we did and what was accomplished. And one of the things I want to say right up front is it's amazing how much the city got done because of this project. And how it sets you up for the future. And I will also say right up front that staff has been awesome. As far as facilitating all the other things that we could do and coming up with those ideas and supporting them. So it's just been an amazing process. So all started in 1998 with a landslide. And you can see that's the reservoir. If you flip back to the slide before, that's the reservoir. Now flip forward. There it is after the slide. It was literally orange. And it was so dirty that Brian had to stop making water because the treatment plant was just in constant backwash. We couldn't make any water. He just like hoped we had enough in the treated water reservoir to last the weekend. We did. So that's what started this. So next. So here's sort of your system. You know, at the top is the reservoir. That's your only water source. So it comes down to the treatment plant, Clearwell, the 2 tanks that are outside of town and down into town. So if the reservoir is offline, you lose everything. So that's, you know, that's how tenuous your system was at the beginning of this. Much better. So what were the options? We raise the dam, get more storage. We can dredge the reservoir, or we could look at alternatives sources. So, and we looked at all of these. So we did look at the dam raise. We actually went and got a grant from the state to look at this. I looked at it as a fatal flaw study. The state has requirements for a dam study, and some of those we skimmed over because we didn't want to spend the money on them right now. We just wanted to know, is this even doable? So that dam was built in 71. This is the first time we dredged. So those are all the items that we were required to look at per the state for a dam raise. I'm not going to go into each one of those, but just so you know that it was fairly involved. So there were red flags. The biggest deal is fish passage. So it's built in 71. If you haven't been up there, it's really tall. On the upstream side, it doesn't seem tall, but you go down to the bottom side, it's like, my goodness, is that what, 80 feet? You know, it's a long ways. And there's no fish passage. So there are requirements that kick in fish passage. But one of the bigger, go ahead, leave it there. So go back. So one of the big deals is a fish ladder needs a certain amount of flow to make it work. And the flow requirements are large enough that we cannot actually store enough water behind that dam to make it work. And we'd be chasing our tail. We'd be raising the dam, trying to get more storage, but then we'd be using it all for the fish ladder that wouldn't gain us anything. There's also this thing that the state wants, which is stream augmentation. So can you store water and let it out at specific times of the year to enhance things like fish life? So again, you got to start storing more water. And our basin isn't big enough to do that. We'd just be chasing our tail again. Water rights triggers fish passage. And there's water rights for usage and there's water rights just for storage. So if we built the dam big enough that we need more water rights, we got to do fish ladders. The other one is if you actually increase the volume of the dam, not volume storing, but of the dam itself by a certain amount, it triggers fish passage. So we just can't we can't raise the dam. So, you know, on one hand, you could say, why did we do the study? On the other hand, now you know, you never have to look at that ever again. You don't have to think about it, put any money towards it, because unless the regulations change, it's done deal, we're not doing it. Okay. So here's alternative sources. Owl Creek, you actually have water rights. You don't have any facilities. We're gonna put in a 1 MGD treatment plant. The cost will now be a lot higher, because this was done, I don't know, 5 years ago. That was like $8 million just to do the treatment, and we don't even know if we can get the water, because the creek's not that big. Water loss reduction, we actually did this project. That's the transmission one. So we did number 2 there. Improvements to the existing source, that's the dredging. That's what we just did. Regionalization, that would be buying into the water on the Willamette that McMinnville is looking to do. At the time, it was like 1.6 million. I think it's gonna be more if you wanna do that, but that's conservation, that's ongoing. Wells, another 8 million. And wells in this part of the valley are not very good. I know Lafayette, Dayton put in a well field, they put in 5 wells and got about half the water that they were looking for. And it was really poor quality. So wells are another really good option. So we did a dredge study. So on the left is contours of the reservoir, so bathymetry, that's below the water level. And on the right is what we thought we could do. We thought we could get 10,000 to 13,000 cubic yards out, which roughly is 2 million gallons.
10,000 to 13
Cubic yards
cubic yards of water or of soil?
soil.
Okay.
So we looked at volume, methods, what you gotta take that soil somewhere, so. And that becomes a huge cost in dredging. Where do you take that soil? The costs there are just for the dredging. The total project cost was 2.5. Also, a lot of permits required. And then we looked at long-term management. So all those things were in that study. So permits and IGAs, we had to get all of those. We moved forward with the dredging project. So DSL and the Corps of Engineers, DEQ, had to get permits from all of them. And they had tons of requirements. The county, turns out we didn't have to get a permit from. McMinnville Water and Light had to get a IGA from them for water, because when we're dredging, that's our only source. So we just lost our only source. So we can't make water while we're dredging. So we had that put in place, and then warehousing. And I'll tell you what, warehousing is great. They said, yeah, you can put solar on the property. And by the way, we're logging this area that's really close to where you are. We'll just push that up in our schedule so that it fits your schedule. And we'll delay replanting so that you can do your work. And they worked with us really well. So construction 2021, we ran into issues. Turbidity, which that just means how dirty is the water. That's all that is. And milfoil, that's a growth. That year, if you remember, we had the heat dome and we didn't have much rain, which contributed to a bumper crop of milfoil all across the Northwest. They were having the same problem everywhere. We had so much milfoil growing that the dredge, it couldn't dredge, it just caught up and just plugged it. And so we got all the permits extended and all the IGAs extended. Came in the next year, added polymer and filter to the settling ponds. Worked like a charm. We had 2 dredges out there and we got an extension of the in-water work period so we could get more stuff out. This is hard to see, but I'll just walk up here. So this is the reservoir. This right here, that yellow, if you can see it, is where we have the detention ponds and the filter. Right next to it, this little area in red is where we put all the soil, big pile. And this line is a pipe up, so we had to pump it up, and it's a pipe back. So the clean water came back and we discharged that actually in the dam spillway. So just some pictures, there's the dredge. And interesting on the left, you can see the different coloration of the water. So the reservoir was so shallow that you see the soil rather than the water. That's that kind. So on the right, that's water from the dredge. It went into these tanks. And the heavy soil was settled out, and that's right on top of the dam. And then it got pumped back up the hill to the settling ponds. And on the left is the water coming back down the hill from the settling ponds. 0 turbidity, which is a big deal. I'll show you a little bit later why. So this is up top. You can see 3 settling ponds that worked in series. And then from the third one, it was piped over to these filters that are just a package filter system. Then it goes down back to the reservoir.
Gordon, I have a question. In the dredging, is there any physical disruption of the soil, or is it just suction?
It's suction. So one of the big deals is erosion control, and you'll see on the left, that black thing is a silt fence on the downstream side of the dam. So that any soil that was piling up there gets caught. And on the right, that's eventually where the soil got piled up. So that keeps, again, all that soil from going down into the drainage. So this is the big thing about turbidity. So one of the requirements from the permit is you got to take the turbidity upstream every 2 hours and then downstream every 2 hours. And it's limited how much you can change. It's not much.
You're just testing it?
You're testing it.
Okay.
So if you got a turbidity, I'm just making up a number of 1 here, that can't go over 5 or you got to shut down. So you cannot affect it very much. So that's why I put the filter on the top. Okay. This just shows the soil that we piled up there. That's not.
That all came out of the reservoir.
Yeah, that all came out of the reservoir. And luckily Weyerhaeuser didn't care that it's big lumps, whatnot. They said, we'll plant it with trees. We don't care. Looks like the forest. And it's good soil.
I was gonna say, we couldn't package and sell it, huh?
Oh, it's good soil. We had to test it.
Yeah.
So 3 times we had tested, and there's this battery of criteria that we had to meet, or Weyerhaeuser was going to say, get it out of here. We met it, so we're good. So that is, again, bathymetry before the dredging. So blue is the deep area, red is really shallow, green is in between. So next. So there it is after. A whole lot more blue and a whole lot more green. So benefits. So you got 2 million gallons of additional raw water storage. So big picture, that's not huge for raw water storage. But that is incredible for when you have a summer where you don't have much rain. That makes your system way more resilient. Because you have that much more sitting out there that you can use. Water quality. So again, turbidity, just think of how dirty is the water. So in rain events, it used to spike to about 40 turbidity units, which by the way is hard to treat. Now, it spikes to about 8. Why is that? Because it's deeper and it can all settle out at the head of the reservoir, and it's not sliding down to where the intake is. So we're deeper and we're cooler. And because we're deeper and cooler, less milfoil is going to grow because it needs heat and sunshine. So that also gives us longer filter runs. What does that really mean? So a filter, what you do is you put in some chemicals that coagulate what's in the water, which just means it makes it clump up. So that when it goes through the filter, it sits on the top of the filter. Well, after a while, it gets dirty, right? Get too much of that stuff and it stops, the water doesn't go through, so you got to backwash. Clean it off. All that backwash water is wasted. Right? And that comes from your clear well, so that's all treated water. So that's lost water. So when you have longer filter runs, you're using less backwash water, and that water that you just treated, more of it now can go down to the city. So you essentially expanded your water supply. So instead of, if you want 1 million gallons, instead of using 1.2 million to get that million, maybe now you're only using 1.1 million. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but we know we're getting better filters.
I have a question. How much of an increase the 2 million is from the total that you had before?
Well, that is the increase. So before the dredging, we had like 9 million. And so now we have 11.
So like more than 10%.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of nested projects. So the intertie we had to do before we did the project. Because once we're dredging, we don't have any raw water, we need water. So we have physically now an intertie with infill water and light. We don't have an IGA for emergency or continued use, but we have the facilities there and we know it works because we used it during the dredge event. So effectively, we have a second water source that makes your water system so much more reliable. And you know, in emergencies, they're not going to say, no, you can't have water. Yeah, so that's just a huge thing. Would it be great to have a third supply? Yes. But now at least you have two. That's gigantic. So some of these other projects we did because the treatment plant was awful. So the clear well, we recoded it inside and out. We did some repair. We totally upgraded all the treatment plant control and SCADA. We rebuilt the filters, replaced a bunch of control valves, recoded everything inside, and replaced our floating dock. And I got some pictures of some. So there's the intertie. That shows a control valve. That box there is a backflow preventer so that water from Carlton can't backflow into their water source, which is a requirement of the state. Next. That's the meter box that's up about 1,000 feet up the hill. Okay.
What are the size of those transmission tanks?
I think it's 6. But their pressure is so much higher than ours that we could just push through whatever we need. We actually had to close down the valve because we get too much. So Clearwell on the left, that's what it looked like before. You can see it's all straight. That's what it looks like now. And inside, go ahead. So the middle is, that's a hole through the floor. So we actually had a leak through the floor. And on the left, that's at the ceiling, and that's a beam that sits on that little L bracket. And it was so corroded that it's like, okay, if we leave this any longer, that beam could fall off. So we welded in more steel. And the other one is the beam and the ceiling, there's a gap between them, and that was corroding to beat the dam. So we cleaned it up and we sealed that. So we did a bunch of structural, and that hole, we just put weld in it. And there was, I don't know, a dozen of those types of holes that we filled up. Only one that went all the way through, but the other ones were starting. So that's the treatment plant. On the right, you see what it looks like. Starting to corrode to beat the dam. We took off all the corrosion, recoated it all. And this will last longer than before. Last time it only lasted 8 years, but it got repainted before when there was water inside the pipe. So it was cold. So no water in this, it's nice and warm. This should last longer. Okay. Well, we redid all the controls. The controls were to a point where it was going to be hard to get replacement parts. It was that old. So at some point, we were gonna have to replace the whole thing anyway. So we just did it at this point. Go ahead. Well, there's our dock. You know, the dredging contractor went out, touched the dock, and it just sort of went. So next, there's the new one. Bigger, more stable, gonna last longer. So essentially, you just had a major upgrade to your water treatment system. So that should do you for major upgrades for maybe the next 15 years. Now, there's always going to be O&M, so there's still going to be costs, but you rebuilt all your filters, put in all the piping inside got replaced, and all the filter media got replaced, bad valves replaced. It's good to go for quite a while. So this dredging project, a great stop. Just because of the dredging, and then we were able to do a whole bunch more. While that was offline, we took advantage of it. Really put the city in good position,
And the grants that we had took care of all of that or most of it?
most of it.
And I've noticed so far this year that, or at least we haven't had water restrictions.
Right.
Is this the outcome of all of these improvements from the transmission line, the dredging and all this? Has it just,
Yes,
okay,
because the transmission line and improvements to the concrete reservoir. Probably saved 80 to 100,000 gallons of lost water a day.
Hmm.
That's a lot
80,000 gallons a day?
to 100,000 gallons.
Yes,
A day.
I'm saying on the minimum side.
Yeah, that's on average.
Okay,
That's how much that transmission project saved you a day. And for the city, it's a lot of. That, you know, you might only use 500,000 a day. And, you know, in the wintertime, you get less. But that's all.
so we were leaking more than we were using.
Not more, but, you know, maybe a quarter.
Quarter of what?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And the dredging will not have reduced that. Except for the reduction in the backflow. We're seeing that now as well. Now, I'm gonna give you that's all great news, and I'm gonna give you a big caveat. That's all based on rain. So if you get a drought here, you still might be going back to restrictions.
Understood.
Right? And, you know, moving forward, it's not a bad thing to consider to just say, hey, in the summer, we're gonna do even odd water. That's just gonna be our standard anymore. Because it's smart. It takes that peak off of one day, spreads. So, you know, some people will call that restrictions. I think it's just prudent water conservation. So that's something that city might want to consider. But yes, you're right. We had a decent water year and then these projects that had a huge impact.
And had paid
Yes,
very well in return.
yes.
Yes.
The waste that we had, what was the reason for it? Could we have avoided somehow, like repair or?
A waste.
Yeah, the waste that we had of 200 or whatever, 100,000. Could we have avoided that with more maintenance? Like, why did that happen initially?
Well, that's things like there's a leak in the water line somewhere. Can't find it. Where is it? You know, that's material just wearing out.
So there's no way to maintain it to our optimal.
Well, now we have plastic pipe that'll last longer. You know, it's always gonna wear out eventually, but we had, you know, essentially steel pipe that eventually wears out. It was old, it was really old. And
Well, some of the old pipe, tell us how much water we were losing just through the old pipe coming down.
well, that's that 100,000 gallons a
Just
day
through the old,
between the reservoir and the pipe. The reservoir, we were, I think, losing about 30,000 gallons a day. And there was, we found a tiny little pipe that went through the side of the reservoir when we emptied it. It's just open.
it was just there draining. Nobody knew what it was for. It was just there
But
draining.
nobody knew it was there.
When you took the old pipe out, old transmission lines out of the steel ones. Did you see where the leaks
Well, we
were?
don't take them out.
Didn't take them out.
If we put the pipe in a different location, it stays in place.
Don't know exactly. So there was many, many. leaks, Fred.
Yeah, it's, you had 7 miles of pipe.
Well, those are some of the pipes that we had early on that we were using to show
Yes,
the congressman.
Gordon, if I remember correctly, what you said is everyone kept expecting to find a large leak in the transmission line and never found one. So it's just a series of small.
Series. Hard to find.
So
Protect death by
did you
ducks.
get the number by taking a measurement of water up here and a measurement of water down there? And
Yeah, Brian got me that number.
okay,
So it is a measurement of what's coming out of the treatment plant, what's coming into the reservoirs.
okay. So it's a solid number.
It's
Yeah.
a good number.
Okay.
Yeah, to follow up on whether it's maintenance or not, it is having a rate structure that accommodates inflationary costs, repairs, operations, and capital improvements. Everything has a lifespan, as Gordon mentioned. And so if you have a rate structure that allows you to leapfrog ahead of waiting before the pipe actually fails, and having a replacement strategy before.
So we should plan way ahead of time, like we know these new pipes will last that much longer. So now we should plan, like whatever, in 10 years, we're gonna change things or we're gonna repairs before we start wasting so much water, right?
And that isn't part of what the work that Deb Lardy and her firm does, part of the rate analysis. Is that her Excel workbooks or mini sheets that you take into account.
Just so you know, the water line from the treatment plant all the way to town is now new.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna last you a long time, but you still have pipe now that's old and leaky. So there's still stuff that needs to be up.
But the new line still needs maintenance. You still have to
Yes.
watch it.
What's the anticipated lifespan? I mean, a long time, but is it 30 years, 50? I mean,
PVC pipe,
forever?
80,
80 years?
unless somebody drives a fence post through it.
Mhm.
Then that's on them, right?
Well, it's still a hole. that
Yes.
Needs to be fixed.
Yes. Okay.
But, PVC pipe, we don't know the actual life expectancy because it hasn't been around as long, The early PVC was the thinner wall pipe and some of that didn't last as long, but now with what they call C900, it's a thick wall pipe, right? I've actually seen a photograph where they had a 12-inch pipe sitting on the ground and backhoe driving over it, sitting on top of it. And it did nothing.
Okay.
It's good pipe. Doesn't mean that, maybe the gaskets, got a flaw in the gasket here or there. But you're in good shape. But in town, there's still really old.
Mhm.
Really old pipe.
Yes.
80 years, it sounds like we'll have a couple generations after us.
Yeah.
Shannon will still be here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
you got a special drink. Any more questions?
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah,
I,
Yeah, thanks,
job
Gordon.
well done, bravo.
Whole team.
I have to say that where we're at now gives me great confidence as opposed to where we have been.
You are so much better off.
The water's cleaner, I can tell you that.
Okay.
I don't see on any social media sites where we're having giant turbidity issues, so this is leaps and bounds forward.
Counselor Skipper?
Yeah, two things. Is that able to be shared with council? The slideshow?
Actually, I'm gonna
yeah.
put it on our website, so it'll be
Thank
shared.
you.
Excellent,
Yeah.
very good, yeah.
then,
Yeah, we were,
how,
So you want some tweaks on it? Okay, well, just tell me the tweaks and I'll tweak it, resend it.
yeah, we were gonna have a conversation about that otherwise. Yeah, thank you.
and then another personal frustration of mine is the engineered estimates or, for some new subdivisions, we know we've been in this kind of dire need for these projects to happen. And I like the positivity and the things that we're hearing, but does that just in essence mean continued development because we have the resources now?
Well, development will continue as long as they want to develop. So what it gets you out of, and this is a big deal, is saying, no, you can't develop, we have a moratorium. Because we can't provide you water. So, on the surface, that sounds okay. Sorry, go away, we don't have water, but it kicks in requirements. So if you put down a moratorium, you can talk about this, you know more about it than I do, Tyler. But it kicks in requirements of a schedule or how you're gonna fix it. And you gotta go fix it.
I was trying to explain that to somebody this morning. They were not responding well.
Right, so it's, okay, we don't have enough water, okay, go get it.
So,
Get the money that you need to, and you're on this schedule, I don't know what the schedule is, but you've gotta go fix that problem to get rid of that moratorium. So it gets us out of that.
Which is probably a lot cheaper than being up against the wall.
And with our rate structure, is our rate structure looking to stay ahead of that issue? With all the new development we have?
So I knew that we are looking, we're good for now. Of course, that's just now. We are looking at other options for how do we get more water, but they're long term. And, there's always McMinnville Water and Light. There's negotiation for how that happens. We've also been talking with Hillsborough.
So we're trying to stay ahead of the problem.
Yes. We're trying to stay ahead, but those are all long-term things.
Good deal.
Related to related to the rates is making sure that we keep our capital improvement plan up to date so that our SDCs are appropriate so that we can have offers to do these big projects. So like Gordon was saying, you want to have the money in the bank for that next big project so that we can have the development instead of not having the money, but having to do that project.
City incredibly fortunate that we got a whole bunch of grants. It was unusual.
Right.
We got way more than most get. So,
And we made good use of it.
and we made good use of it, so that's, yeah. So we did well with what we received, so we were fortunate to receive.
Okay.
Get Shannon for all of the projects.
But I think
Did this
Later.
come from city staff or was it a professional grant writing agency? Then thank you, city staff, for all the efforts and work, everything. that's been put in.
And with that, it's a good time to end this conversation and move on to item B. Gordon,
Carlson Water System Survey, and before Gordon goes on to Sunshine and Roses about our water system again. I will tell you from a city manager's point of view, who's working on the long-term solution, please do not go home and turn on your hose and just leave it running.
Did somebody do that?
Actually, I couldn't afford it.
Well, I'm saying we have all this water.
No, but we still have to pay for it when it comes through the hose.
Yeah.
That's the one thing we need to remember. When it comes through the pipes, we are paying for it individually.
And we do still, we do sort of
Yes.
use it wisely.
Yeah.
We're not overflowing.
Yeah.
We can't serve the valley, I think. And we're doing well,
That doesn't
Okay.
mean we just
right?
go willy-nilly.
Unlimited supply.
Good use of the legal phrase there.
Okay. Shannon?
I don't have another presentation. I'm just gonna talk this one, and this one's short. So we just had the sanitary survey. This always used, when I hear sanitary, I think wastewater. But this is water. And this is a survey that is done by the state. So the Oregon Health Division, every 3 years. And they come and they review your water system, yours. And I had to talk to Brian about this because it's usually an O&M thing that I don't see. But what they mostly look at is storage and treatment. They're not looking at your pipes. It's those facilities, which includes, you have wells and include the wells, so they include the intake. So it's all this source, treatment and storage facilities. And I believe it's like a 3-day event. They come with page after page after page of things they're going to look at and check off and review. And at the end of that, they develop a report. And typically they will, in that report, they'll say, okay, here's the things you could do better. Here's your deficiencies. Here's your actions. Here's your to-do list. So this year, no corrective actions, no deficiencies.
Fabulous.
Yeah. And I forgot the exact verbiage, but we would have been a superb system, except we had a couple reporting crickets. So nothing big, but you gotta have everything perfect. So aside from that official report that says you guys are good to go, nothing you gotta do, no deficiency. In the email, the state official said she wanted to take the time to also congratulate us because, and I'm reading this, our written protocol, how we do things, is truly commendable. Meaning if somebody retired or somebody new came in, we have all the documentation already to say, here. Excellent. Truly commendable. I think that is, wow. And then she said, the knowledge base of your staff is a testament to the dedication. He was very impressed with the city's staff and what they know and their attitude and what they're actually doing. I don't know if you know what backflow devices are, but
Yeah.
Shirley's very familiar with them.
it's exactly what it sounds like. It keeps water from backflowing into your system. So it's like connected to things like a irrigation system.
Mhm.
Or like if you have potable water that's going to the wastewater treatment plant, better have a backflow preventer, because you don't want anything coming down. So there is a process of testing it and reporting the testing. And they said, our procedure is acceptable.
Mhm.
So she was incredibly impressed with our system and with our staff. And also of note, not too long ago, the city invested in new SCADA system. And what that allowed, and it provides all this information about the treatment plant. So there's profiles of the filters, you can see what's going on. She was just like, wow, with all of that as well. So the controls and SCADA system. You guys are doing great.
Mhm.
So that's the sanitary survey. Another one will be done for you. The flying colors right now for the system and the staff.
Mhm.
So
Good deal.
That's the best I can do, sorry. But congratulations to you and
Absolutely.
the staff.
Excellent.
that's the.
That's really
It's full staff.
nice.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, go away, Dwayne.
I can go. Okay.
All righty, we are at Cycle Oregon.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, Cycle Oregon has submitted an event application in order to have part of their riders through the city of Carlton. Ms. Emerson, do you want to add anything before we allow Cycle Oregon? The application?
So as you can see in the application, Cycle Oregon is not an ordinary event that we have that comes through here to use our parks. They want to spend the night, so that requires camping and tents and some trailers. And it's not just a few people, it's 800 people.
Oh, my God.
So it's something really incredible for the opportunity for Carlton, the downtown businesses, and the amount of, not just the amount of people that would get exposed to our beautiful city. But it's a great thing that it's for exposure for these people on bikes or serving people. So they want to spend a night in the park. They have a few other things what they're requesting that don't typically follow our ordinances or park rules, such as camping in the park, driving on the grass areas. We maintain that vehicles stay on the roads, so there's
Yeah.
some they're gonna want to access off the roads. The dawn to dusk park hours, obviously, we're gonna need some modifications and your approval for that, because they're gonna be there all night. And then they have a band or audio equipment, AV equipment to use on their stage. So they will have a need for approval on using amplified equipment, which also needs your approval for the special event permit. So if you have any questions, Anne Marie is available and she's online. She is a great resource and has put together this application. And if you have like details, she can happily help you with that. But in general, they're looking for permission from you to use the park on these items that go against our normal park rules.
I just have a general question. Did we the event before, or did we do another one? So I do recall a bike event where there was camping. Is that Cycle Oregon? or is that-
I don't think it was Cycle Oregon. I think it was smaller
That's-
scale.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question too with security. And that's like a form issue we had before, but it says require if you have more than 50 people attending the event. And the person marked no. But we are requiring, so what is the,
So they
What
have
is the
a
deal
safety
here?
officer. I met him, he's a retired police officer. He actually worked with Chief Martinez in Lebanon, so they hit it off, and had a great conversation. So he is like the main safety guy, and then they train all of their volunteers that go to each site. And they go around and they look for intoxicated people, they keep their eye out for, if they're, who's not a writer, who's not is a writer, because they will have music, and Marie said that people can come down to the park and enjoy the music. So he has a team of people, so it's not like a hired security team, they go with the writers at each location. He works with the police department here, they've already hit it off.
So is that allowed then? Like, because this is not what the language say, right? The language says higher security. This is not a higher security.
The requirement is that any event that has more than 50 people has to provide us information about the security that they are providing. So that required language is not saying you have to hire a security company. You have more than 50. That section of the application doesn't apply if events are smaller than.
Yeah, but it is more than.
Right, but that requirement is not saying you have to hire security. If you have more than 50 people, it's that you have to provide the security plan that you have. And that's just one of the pieces of information that we're requesting of applicants. Is that? I feel like
Not really. I just see it require and
that's.
and that's what I'm
the
stuck
security
at.
Section is required
Yeah,
for events only. We don't have specific security requirements of events larger than.
okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. I guess just below. Let's have you higher security, whatever. So you could just be. Could be anything.
Amy, would it be good to let Anne Marie talk to us about some of this stuff?
Sounds like she might be trying, but the speaker is. It's really broken up on there.
I'd be
I
happy
was-
to speak about security if you would like me to.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and for considering our request. As I think that's Amy that I was hearing over there. If not, it's Shannon. We have, so we do have a law enforcement liaison, Eric Judah. He's a retired Oregon State Police officer who will be traveling with us throughout the event. And so he is that liaison between the community and our event, and, you know, is there to really answer questions and concerns. We also have about 100 volunteers who will be with us on the event, and they all go through training with us as an organization. And so they understand our safety and risk management plan, and they can be that liaison as well between riders in the community and then the staff of the organization if anything were to happen. So we really, while we don't hire external security, because in 33 years of doing this, we have never run into a need for that. We will have a lot of people on the ground at the event who will be paying attention and can enforce rules. And if, you know, if they're something outside of the scope of what they're comfortable with, they'll radio myself or someone else to come manage the situation. We typically, because of the nature of this event, there are people kind of up and moving around all night long. You know, people getting up to go to the bathroom or the kitchen staff starting early. So I think there's enough movement around the area that any kind of people coming in from the outside, which is where I feel like there'd be more of a need for security. It's not as though people are walking into like an empty lot with nothing happening. There's a lot of people moving around and eyes on what the situation.
If I may, I have like
Yeah.
3 questions. So I'll make the easiest one first. On the map that's submitted for camp, there's RV section. Is that not on private property, or is that? It looks like it's in the farm field here.
It isn't, yep.
We've gotten permission from the private property owner.
They have been in contact with the farmer and the crop production cycle, and I believe do you have written permission, Anne-Marie, or is it still verbal at this point?
It's verbal at this point, but I did talk to him a week or two ago and just confirmed that we do have permission.
And then the second question of 3 is on page 186, it talks about where you spoke with the Public Works Director about dumping gray water into the headworks. And then on page 204, it talks about the gray water dumping again, but I just want to clarify because it's talking about Bucks Sanitary pumping the porta potties. That's not gray water.
No, this
So-
is a different tank. This is not the sanitary. This is the gray water tank that they use like from the showers.
And sinks.
Sinks.
Yeah, I understand. Great. That's
Right.
what I'm just confused though with the
Right.
vacuum truck to pump from porta potties. There's no gray water in porta potties.
That is true. And that would be something that if Bucks Sanitary wants to work out with, they would have to work out with Brian. He has done that in the past.
I just was curious because of the treatment and I mean, 10,000 gallons of gray water is a little different, obviously. So yeah, just clarification on that. And then, sorry, there might be 4 questions, but tree trimming that was requested, who's paying for that? I mean, did the city foot the bill for extra tree trimming that was requested because of large trucks that were coming down there? I mean, it was, I forget the page that I noted.
No, you're right. It was noted in there. We haven't got exactly the trees that they requested, but we did have arborists down here for 3-4 days this last week, so they might have already got the ones that they needed trimmed. So Cycle Oregon will let us know after the fact.
Okay, and then the last thing that I didn't see in here is outside of the camping event, how is traffic control gonna be taken care of with all these cyclers coming into town? Seems like a big bottleneck.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so when we arrive on Sunday, people will have ridden from Albany, so they'll be at the tail end of about 74 miles of riding. And at that point, people will be fairly spread out. So you're not going to see a huge pack of people coming through town together. When we are on our route, we manage traffic a couple different ways. So we have a few motorcycle patrols. We have probably 6 support and gear vehicles that can pick up riders who have injuries or their bike has a mechanical malfunction. We'll have a medical team with us. And so all of those folks, as they're traveling through, are really just keeping riders along the side of the road. We do at the start of the event and then each night before people ride, remind them of road safety rules. And if riders are not complying with those, then we'll pull them aside and talk with them and make sure that they understand the expectations of following Oregon rules of the road as a vehicle, being a bike on the road. We don't have a huge amount of vehicle traffic. I mean, I realize there's 35 RVs pictured on that map, and our volunteers are driving, but you know, the 800 or so people who are coming are not in cars. Most of them are on bikes. And again, the vehicles will kind of be spread out throughout the morning. So we typically won't have too many vehicles and cyclists on the road at the same time. And then as we leave in the morning, we will be leaving and heading out of town. So you shouldn't see really bikes coming back through town Monday morning. You'll probably have some of our vehicles leaving that direction because they'll head through McMinnville to drive out to Cloverdale the other direction.
So I guess what I'm kind of getting from Kevin's question was, are we going to be seeing like 800 bicyclists coming in a clump, or how spread out is that going to be looking?
You will see people coming through probably between 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So those 800 people will be spread out over 4 or 5 hours. You know, you'll see there's a couple.
In?
Pardon?
Which way are they coming in? Are they coming in on, which road are they coming in on?
We're coming in on Main Street.
Well, Highway 47 up that way or out of,
Yeah, I know, so we will, be coming up, Mineral Springs Road to Hendricks Road. And that's the
Okay.
direction we'll be coming in. So we try and keep the cyclists off the main roads as much as possible, just because everybody, drivers and cyclists, have a better experience on those roads. So their last stop before coming to Carlton will be in Dayton. We'll do a rest stop in Dayton, and then that's the direction they'll be coming in from.
When they come into Carlton and come on Main Street, is the route to come all the way down Main Street to Carl? Yes, or can they come various different ways once they get into town?
We'll have them signed to come down Main Street. So we'll have a sign team that will go out the day before and put up pink arrows along the route just to show people where they need to go. And then at the end of the day, we have a sweep vehicle that follows the last rider in and picks up all the signs. So yes, we would like them to come all the way down Main Street. I think we have found that most communities appreciate the fact that we're showing riders the community that they're visiting. People will probably stop and get off their bike and buy ice cream or a beer or snacks or something, and then they can proceed from there into camp. I think the trucks that will be coming into the park, like the shower trucks and the kitchen trucks, I don't remember exactly, but I think we might have them turning down Scott Street or one of the side streets a little bit before the last turn into the park, just so that they have a better angle for getting into that last turn.
are there any other questions? Yes, counselors.
Is there a plan of any signage to let the community know that there's gonna be this fairly large bike event going on?
We have two folks in the community that we've been working with to help coordinate community efforts. Noelle, Amaya, and Kim Myers are our community managers. And so they have been working with the Carlton Business Association, and I know there are plans to get the word out to the community that we're going to be there.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Okay, do we need a motion on this? Do we need approval on this?
Yeah, you do need a motion to allow for the variances to.
I have one quick question again. I.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, all right.
We're not setting any like precedent. Approving the variances, especially with the hot topic of camping and things like that.
You know, with our code update, we specifically include as loud camping related to special event permits. So this is for kind of not opening the door for those issues.
On page 185, there is a sample.
I make a motion to approve the Cycle Oregon event, their use of Winterberg Park on September 9th through 11th, with includes camping in Winterberg Park, parking 2 event vehicles in the grass area, bringing in the kitchen trailer on Friday, September 8th, and the use of amplified sound equipment in the park.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Anne Marie. We'll
Thank
see
you very
in-
much. We'll see you in September.
Yeah. Alrighty. Inclusive and fitness equipment grant applications, item D.
Yes, this is just really an informational item, council. I wanted to let you know, we're always looking for opportunities when we hear council ideas, wants, even those outside of strictly the council rules items. And in this case, we thought we had two possibilities, one for fitness equipment and one for inclusive playground products. Unfortunately, the way they were advertised, it looked like a grant. And we thought we might have one piece of equipment in each category that would fit within the amount of the grant. So we went for it, and then we were told it is not a grant, it was a loan. Fortunately, we're able to pursue that, but we wanted to let you know that we do always. We're always trying to be creative, we're trying to find resources where we didn't think we had any. We're always looking for rabbits out of the hat, so we just wanted to let you know, it's just good information.
Thank you. Which takes us to item E, adopt the park draft application handbook.
Mayor and council, we have had several inquiries from citizens interested in sponsoring or volunteering to clean, plant, or otherwise help out in our city green spaces. And so we understand that we want to make sure that we're working towards establishing policies to enhance Carlton's livability, as goal 2 suggests, and also goal 3 of providing volunteer opportunities for community members. But we also know that we can learn from other cities and make sure if we offer any of these volunteer opportunities that, you know, somebody doesn't adopt a park and pull up playground equipment and put it in a wine bar. So so we did a lot of research. Amy put a lot of hours in. I put a lot of hours in, and we've come up with a draft. We've also talked to our insurance team. It still needs more refinement, but we wanted to put this draft in front of council so that you could provide us direction of if you want us to continue looking at finalizing. I call it adopt a park, but it's really adopt a space. If it's on there, it's everything from parks to potential green spaces in JR2, or even along the rail corridor, or even planters. We currently have planters along Monroe Street, but that change. There's also people who are looking to help entrance funds. So it's
Main
really
Street.
green spaces, although I call it. But really, we're looking for feedback. Do you want us to continue looking at finalizing this, having the legal review, having the insurance company give their job descriptions for volunteers? Because that was an essential component from an insurance agent. The volunteers are very clear about what their job duties are. And is there any more information that you feel is absent from this application that you want to see in this program? There's also, through this research that we did, we found a resolution by the city of Florence that formalizes a city donation policy program that we believe would be useful to adopt for our own city donation program. So that we can continue this work. We're looking at the civic center, possibly donations for this program. So this would just formalize a resolution for many opportunities to our city. And then last but not least is when we're looking to identify locations throughout the city, it would be nice not just to include it as the north entrance, the south entrance, east entrance, the west entrance, planter 1, planter 2, planter 3, planter 4. We thought it would be an opportunity for us to acknowledge and recognize some members in our community that have contributed a great deal. Staff has put together a list by a number of years of service. This could also have opportunities we've discussed, even if we named our structured in the field. Oh, shelters. Park shelters is, let's just say we picked one. Carl, 16 years of service on shelter, what is now 3. You could put a little history plaque of what the person did and add it to our history walking tour that is we already have. And so we could expand upon that and also increase the history of the culture. That was a no. Sorry.
So you're looking from us,
For these bullet points, do you want us to continue finalizing the Adopt a Card program? If yes, is there anything you see significantly missing that you want to see more information on? Number 3, do you want us to proceed with drafting a resolution similar to the city of Florence that's included? And number 4, do you want us to consider or bring forward a plan to remain with this program? So maybe number 1, would you like us to continue working towards finalizing?
I would. Mhm.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the program. though. Do you,
you're
s-
not a question.
I am
You're a lot.
never that. Do you see that, I understand the whole volunteer aspect, insurance and all that stuff. Do you see it, well, I guess we don't know, maybe it's just an unknown right now, but some of it kind of seems like, man, do I really want to sign up for this? It's like 2 years. I need to be a spokesperson. I need to keep track of hours. You know, that kind of seems maybe a little cumbersome to somebody who's like, man, I just want to spread bark dust on South 7th Street. And now you're making me sign my life away and keep track of hours. That's the part that gave me a little bit of hesitation. I understand the legality and the insurance thing, but I don't know if maybe there's a way to make that less burdensome on a spokesperson or something. It feels like, as somebody who volunteers a lot, like that just
So
makes me kind of like, oh, what am I doing for that?
So we looked at the number of hours and there is probably a way where with the insurance company that we don't have that number of hours. But we also thought, you don't have to say, so Bob showed up at 8:15 and stayed till 9:22. And so he did 13, whatever. You don't have to get that specific, but it's also a way for us to recognize our volunteers for number of hours of service if they choose to participate in this program. And to be able to develop a volunteer recognition for people who are contributing to our city's beautification. Parts. So that is something that, can be discussed. Is it doesn't have to be to the second, to the minute, but just a general of, I had 4 people show up for 4 hours on Saturday and report that amount, once a quarter to us. The other one mentioned for 2 years, we do provide like signage. This park is adopted by such and such. And one thing we saw from city to city to city, because Amy and I discussed this quite a bit, is you want a significant commitment because you don't want to be putting it up and 6 months later taking it down and having somebody else to adopt the park. You want some sort of commitment in order to put up the signage.
Would you be able to have independent, like roving city volunteers? I guess that would be able to show up at the, there's a cleanup event up at the upper park per se that's being put on by just to pick on somebody, the Carlton Business Association. If there's just general volunteers and then main coordinators, do we have a mechanism to facilitate kind of a body of or
If there's a group of people that wants to come and help,
Absolutely, that can be worked out similar to what we just did on Saturday, where people showed up at a certain period of time, they filled out the waiver form.
They
and
did?
then, like I said, I could say we had about 12.
Yep.
12 hours, or 12 people who showed up for 4 hours on Saturday, and therefore we've got something.
sounds like we already have something in place. Good.
We just wanna formalize it, put some bumpers on it, so again, we're not playing. They don't think it's their park. And also make sure the legal and insurance team don't have significant issues with potential litigation or workers' comp laws, or somebody who might trip over a tree branch. making a trail.
Mayor Washington is not allowed to volunteer.
I was done picking up trash. It
Well,
was after.
I'm in strong support of having residents, citizens, volunteers, visitors, donate and or adopt parks, volunteer. I'm always in strong support of that. I also think that, should a individual want to, stay out of the light and, not be recognized, but perform the work, they should have every right to that too.
I think public embarrassment here.
So do all of these forms have to be filled out?
They all have a purpose, so we will continue to review them with the legal. But they do have they all have a purpose.
That would be enough right there to make me decide not to do that.
Yeah, that.
I would just go ahead and do it on my own.
That's the end.
I understand what you're saying, but if there's some way we could abbreviate that, it might be.
We will look at that. We did choose a middle ground as far as cities that we looked at. And this one was one of the most comprehensive that had already been reviewed by your insurance company.
Okay.
We do want to respect our volunteers.
There were some cities that had handbooks.
Yeah.
Dozens and dozens and dozens.
Yeah, I would, yeah. That's nice.
Intimidating.
This is pretty intimidating.
Yeah, that's,
Hey, what part is intimidating?
it's not
It's just so
intimidating,
much.
it's just,
It's just so much.
What is?
I get annoyed.
Do you think it's too much to spend a liability if they volunteer for the city?
That I would probably do.
Couldn't that be?
Because it's one piece of paper and it's one form. You start, my frustration level is very low. You
It's,
start handing me something that requires as many pages as a tax return, I'm not gonna do it.
what if it was one signature? But
How much do I have to read?
same number of pages, but you only sign.
Pushing it.
Some of it is it describes what can be adopted activities that are examples. So it gives examples. There's also,
Well, that could be like a brochure that goes with
it's
a
the-
one-page signature thing.
well, it's one application. So that's at the front, so people know what they're getting into.
But
what
they get to
could do.
keep that copy of examples of what you could do.
Sure.
So
They
the
give
city
it-
just needs one signature on one piece of paper.
I didn't guarantee what.
No, no, because one thing that is very clear from the insurance agent is having a job description. And that is gonna require.
I agree that we should have, like, there needs to be a book, but. Like, it's like a commitment, like I said before committing to do something, and they need to provide some information, we don't want to. Do whatever. Like, we want to have. At least knowing a general idea what they're doing there, and what's the purpose, so it makes sense to have something, I think. There's nowhere you can go without. And do things, like you go find a job or a contract, you're gonna have paperwork to follow. Just how things work, like, I don't see how you can run away from that and still not have problems in the future, so it makes sense.
I understand correct. But as big as the application is right now. That we kept it as minimized as or as small as possible. Am I understanding things correctly?
There's probably some spacing issues I could do to try to shrink down the pages.
But the content cannot shrink.
I don't know, we can look at streamlining it, but I can't promise.
I think things like all the safety procedures and the activities they do, suggestions and all like that is more you know, once you've signed on with your name, your address, your plot of land you want to work and what you're gonna do, all the rest of this, you just hand them and say, here's some information about how to be safe and
Here's some information, sign it at the bottom to guarantee us that you read it.
That's what we have right.
Is that what you have right now?
Well, that's
Okay,
it. That's,
That's the
problem. There's a lot to read.
No, I didn't get. I mean, if I were to do this, it would not be. You know, everybody's different.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Well, you know, we'd do it and see how many volunteers we get coming forward.
That's me. It's different.
So am I hearing that you'd like us to continue looking at streamlining and finalizing this program?
Yes,
Yes, please.
it's a good idea.
All right, but is this application gonna be something like online that can be done as a fillable application as opposed to handwriting it out?
We can work on that.
I mean, that would, you know,
That'd make it easier.
make it a lot easier.
Are you meaning like submitted online as well, or just like PDF, you could type it in and then print it? Or both?
Yeah, because sometimes when you submit it online, it doesn't come out correctly, so I wouldn't mind, you know, printing it out after I do it, but to be able to sit at my computer and fill it out that way, it's be much easier.
I think it should just be an online form, you fill it out and you send it to you guys.
Well,
Avoid
true.
having to come here and waste staff time handing out paper and like talking with the person, just. Overall, it should make it simple, you just go to the website, fill it out and send it to you. There's no in between, middleman person.
Designing that site to do that is probably more complicated than just having the.
We can have a form, like an online form. And do that with
We-
Microsoft or.
We have some problems with that, correct, already. You know, our application for whatever, it's, you know, you fill it out online and submit it. It's been problems with it.
Right, we don't have a whole lot of them that you can submit online. So the one that we have that you submit online and it shows directly are maybe 6 little lines. Like my name, my address, my phone number. I am moving out this day. I did the move out form. We have,
Our committees, you know,
those are just PDFs that are fillable PDFs. So you can type them in and then you'd print it and you'd have to bring it to City Hall. Or email it to do that.
Move forward with the finalization. Would you like us to move forward with resolution regarding the city donation?
yes.
Any input on names, or do we want to talk about it further when we look at finalizing the program?
The names of,
I think you look at finalizing it when you look at the program. I mean, it would be probably helpful maybe to kind of have a little bit more or examples or pictures of what does that look like? Like, is it a 6x6 sign or is it, you know what I mean? Like right next to the City of Carlton, it's this huge thing, you know, not just being
Yeah.
honest.
and again, we can ask for citizen input too.
The names of the people that we're naming them after.
I think we could ask for citizen input on some of the other historical people.
Yeah, there's a
Gonna end up with a park called Parking the Park Base.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't, they can give us input, we don't have to accept them. Are these, did you have also in mind, like, where these?
Well,
would
those are not
actually go?
I mean, those are not like, that's it, no more.
Shannon, back to the donation program. For instance, in the city of Lawrence, is that just is there any provisions for tax write-offs, that type of thing?
Yes.
So how does that work with us? I mean,
I can't remember exactly where I read it, but it does say that They can be tax deductible and they advise you to talk to your accountant.
I remember seeing that.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be like having to go through a 501c3, you know, other types of donations, okay.
So which pleasure, folks, just move ahead with it.
That's my pleasure.
Okay.
Hopefully for a finalized version.
Okay,
Examples of names. pictures.
all righty. Got it? All right. In that case, it looks like we are adjourning this session. Do I have a motion? No, I can't do that. Can
You would adjourn the motion.
I? Do a motion to adjourn?
I motion,
To adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Then we're.
All right. Then the city council executive. Okay. The see, the work session, the works, how am I doing this?
Council meeting.
The regular session of the the July council meeting is closed and we are now going into executive session. Is adjourned and we're back into public session, are we? Okay, then I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Got a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.